had a stroke while taping. It's crazy to be on the other side, around the hospital. You're looking in the face of these people and you're obviously scared.
She was a doctor the world trusted, known for helping others with care and precision. But one ordinary day changed everything in a way no one expected. What seemed like simple signs turned into something far more serious and life-changing. How did a woman who understood the body so well miss the warning her own body was sending? Sandra Lee's difficult road. An individual doesn't instantly acquire the skill to overlook discomfort or peril all at once. Often this trait is cultivated during formative years. It gradually develops from early experiences, where a person's upbringing influences how they confront challenges and how they get accustomed to enduring unease without taking a pause. Sandra Lee was raised in a household where healthcare was an integral part of daily activities. Her dad was a dermatologist, and her mom was also employed in the medical field. As a result, Sandra spent much of her early years immersed in medical literature, clinical photos, and discussions on healthcare and diseases. For most people, such an environment might have appeared unusual or intimidating. However, for Sandra, it felt entirely routine. In that setting, the human body was approached without any sense of mystery. It was viewed as something that should be closely studied, comprehended, and repaired with a composed demeanor. Gradually, this perspective became second nature to her. From a young age, she was taught that challenges should be managed with diligence, patience, and self-control. The path her father took towards becoming a dermatologist was quite challenging. During his youth, he received minimal encouragement and faced significant barriers to acquiring information easily. He relied on a dated medical book to educate himself as he independently navigated the complexities of the field. Over time, with perseverance and relentless effort, he gradually established a clinic. This clinic eventually laid the groundwork for the family's progress in subsequent generations. Sandra observed everything around her intently from a young age. Consequently, her path seemed predetermined before she could even begin to ponder alternatives. The future looked promising, straightforward, and persuasive. There was never a moment when she considered a different calling. Immersed in the world of medicine, the direction she was heading in felt like a natural fit. Following that journey, something else emerged. Sandra gained notable self-control, learned to manage stress effectively, and developed a consistent drive to keep going, even when she was physically or mentally drained. Initially, these traits appeared beneficial. However, as time passed, they turned into instinctive responses. As Sandra matured, she retained those routines. They accompanied her through her journey in medical school and the challenging training years, where the demands were more severe and errors had more serious repercussions. She pursued her education at UCLA, persistently advancing toward the medical path she had long envisioned for herself. For a significant period, it seemed like everything was unfolding precisely as intended. Eventually, however, there was an unexpected shift. After wrapping up her fourth year, Sandra found herself not being selected for a dermatology residency. This wasn't just a minor setback, it was a significant event that totally derailed the professional journey she had always envisioned for herself. The job she associated with her dad, her early years, and her whole background suddenly seemed uncertain. For a short while, Sandra thought about taking a completely different path. This idea was fleeting, but it unveiled a significant truth. It was the first time ever that her future seemed uncertain. Rather than leaving, she decided to keep going. Sandra continued her journey in the field of dermatology, finished her education, and ultimately went back to work at the clinic her father had established after years of hard work and dedication. Superficially, it looked as if things had settled back into their usual pattern. Her existence seemed stable, rational, and fruitful. But how did the world get to know her? Strange videos to worldwide fame. Sandra Lee's path to fame was unconventional. Unlike most physicians, her journey to recognition differed significantly. She wasn't thrust into the limelight due to a groundbreaking scientific discovery, a high-profile court case, or a major TV network's interview. Rather, she gained popularity through videos that many initially doubted they could ever watch. Initially, her presence on YouTube didn't draw much interest. Her first videos resembled medical documentation rather than something meant to entertain. They were straightforward, highly technical, and centered predominantly on what occurred within her clinic. As a result, many people considered them too dull and overly clinical to keep viewers engaged for any significant period. Gradually, things began to transform. Sandra started sharing videos that focused on removing blackheads, treating cysts, dealing with lipomas, and performing other dermatological procedures. These videos may have been difficult for some to watch. Initially, they seemed off-putting. However, people found themselves irresistibly drawn to them. There was an unusual sense of gratification in watching pent-up pressure being relieved and long-hidden issues finally being resolved. A single video had a profound impact and completely transformed her life. A big blackhead was extracted from an older woman's face. The process was straightforward and lacked any serious risks. It wasn't filled with high emotions or surprising events. Instead, it was a calm and genuine experience where something long stuck beneath the skin was finally released. The viral video spread rapidly online. It amassed over 75 million views, making it the top-performing video in Sandra Lee's professional journey. Beyond that, it established the persona that quickly gained worldwide recognition: Dr. Pimple Popper. Folks weren't just tuning in out of curiosity. Numerous watchers reported experiencing an unusual sense of relief while viewing the footage. Despite the discomforting appearance of the procedures, they also found them bizarrely soothing and fulfilling. A few viewers struggled to keep their eyes on the screen, but continued coming back repeatedly, stunned by their own disbelief at what they had witnessed. Following that, Sandra Lee saw her professional life grow quickly. Her online videos amassed an audience in the billions. Devoted fans emerged, identifying as popaholics. In due time, TV producers showed interest, resulting in a hit show that ran for multiple seasons. Her achievements also extended to launching her skincare line, accompanied by a constant flow of patients, filming commitments, and media focus. However, there was a different truth that lay beneath the surface of all that achievement. Sandra's profession relied significantly on accuracy and mastery. She had to keep her hands unwavering throughout each task. Maintaining intense concentration was crucial at every moment. Even the slightest error could have a significant impact on her surroundings. Her job was characterized by relentless stress, meticulous actions, and the capacity to stay composed under the scrutiny of a vast audience. Beyond her professional life, Sandra Lee seemed to maintain a calm and steady personal existence. She tied the knot with Jeffrey Rebish, who pursued medical studies with her and eventually collaborated with her in the field of dermatology. In time, their relationship evolved beyond marriage into a professional partnership. They operated the same clinic, maintained identical work hours, and ultimately ventured into several television projects together. Unlike numerous celebrity pairs, they seldom drew attention due to arguments or sensational incidents. They managed to keep their partnership under wraps, focusing on practicality and emphasizing their careers. Over time, the distinctions between their professional and personal lives became less noticeable. Looking at it from the outside, things appeared calm and harmonious. Their family wasn't involved in any significant controversies or issues in the public eye. However, beneath that serene facade, there was an entirely different kind of tension. As Sandra became more popular, her career increasingly consumed her life. The filming calendar got packed. New patients kept coming in. Every year, the pressure to meet expectations increased. Keeping up her achievements required nearly non-stop focus and effort. Gradually, everything else in life started to take a back seat to the demands of that job. But then, tragedy struck. The strange, ignored feelings. Sandra Lee had finally started noticing a change in her life. The loud and busy rhythm that once filled her home had become quieter. Her children were older, the house felt calmer, and most of her energy now went into work. From the outside, everything still looked normal. Her career remained successful, her schedule stayed busy, and the world around her kept moving at the same fast pace. But deep inside, something had already started changing. That day began like every other filming day. The cameras were prepared, the crew stood ready, and patients waited outside for their procedures. Sandra walked into the room with her usual calm expression. She looked focused, confident, and completely in control. Her job demanded precision every single day. For years, she had trained herself to stay steady under pressure without showing weakness. Long hours and exhaustion had become normal parts of her life. That filming schedule was especially demanding. Several long recording days had been placed back to back, each requiring non-stop concentration and careful movements. Sandra was used to pushing herself through stress. She had done it for years, but near the end of the day, something strange happened. At first, the signs felt small. Nothing seemed serious enough to stop working immediately. Sandra suddenly noticed unusual sweating and a light trembling feeling moving through her body. There was also a strange sensation that things no longer felt completely under control. She paused briefly to regain focus, then continued working. That was what she always did. Her body had shown signs of stress before, but she had learned to keep moving no matter how tired she felt. Ignoring discomfort had become part of her daily life. After leaving the set, Sandra still believed there were simple explanations for everything she was feeling. She had recently started hormone therapy, so sudden warmth and discomfort did not seem alarming. Stress and exhaustion also felt like reasonable answers after such intense workdays. But as the evening continued, the situation became harder to ignore. When Sandra tried eating, swallowing suddenly felt different. She could still swallow, but something felt slightly wrong. It was difficult to explain clearly, yet noticeable enough to stay in her thoughts. Soon afterward, she became restless. Sitting still no longer felt comfortable. It was almost as if her body had developed its own strange rhythm, separate from her thoughts. Then sharp pains suddenly appeared in her legs. These were not normal aches from working too hard. The pains arrived quickly, sharply, and disappeared just as fast. After that came an even stranger feeling, tiny electric sensations running through her body. The feelings were brief, but they returned often enough that they could not simply be ignored. Sandra finally went to bed, hoping sleep would fix everything, but sleep never truly came. Her mind was calm, yet her body refused to relax. Strange sensations continued appearing one after another, making it impossible for her to settle down completely. Even then, she kept convincing herself nothing serious was happening. Each symptom seemed small when viewed alone. None felt frightening enough to create panic. She told herself it had simply been a difficult day and that resting overnight would probably return everything to normal by morning. Sometime during the middle of the night, Sandra got out of bed and tried walking around. That was when the changes became much clearer. Her movements no longer felt natural. She could still walk, but every step felt delayed, almost as if her body needed extra time to respond. It was not exactly pain, and it was not numbness either. Instead, it felt like a strange disconnect between her thoughts and her movements. Even her balance had changed. Walking through familiar parts of her home suddenly felt unsteady. She was not falling, but something clearly no longer worked the way it always had before. Looking back later, the warning signs were already serious, but at that moment, it was around 2 in the morning. Everyone else in the house was asleep, and Sandra did not want to wake anyone over feelings she still struggled to fully understand. Part of her believed she was simply exhausted after too many stressful days. She hoped that enough rest would allow her body to recover naturally. So, she went back to bed. And once again, she chose to wait. Morning finally arrived, but nothing felt normal anymore. The strange signals from the night before had become impossible to ignore. As Sandra stepped out of bed, she immediately noticed one side of her body responding differently from the other. She could still move, but there was clear weakness on one side, almost like half her body had fallen out of sync. Years of medical training immediately pushed her to test herself. She lifted both arms forward, a simple neurological test doctors often use to detect serious problems. At first, both arms stayed raised. Then slowly, her left arm began drifting downward. The movement was small but undeniable. Sandra then spoke out loud just to hear her own voice. The moment she heard herself speak, she realized something else had changed. Her words no longer sounded smooth and natural. There was a slight delay and distortion she recognized immediately. Deep inside, Sandra already understood what these signs could mean. And for the first time, the fear she had been pushing away became impossible to ignore. Yet, even then, one final thought still entered her mind, familiar and automatic after years of pushing through discomfort. What if she was simply imagining everything after a sleepless night and too much stress? The scary morning, Sandra Lee slowly walked down the stairs to meet her parents. She was not crying, she was not panicking. Her steps were calm, but inside her mind, she was trying to confirm something very important. She wanted to know if what she was feeling was real or just stress playing tricks on her body. Deep down, she already felt something was wrong, but she still hoped there could be another simple reason. Her father was a doctor. Her mother had worked in healthcare for many years. They had both seen serious medical emergencies before, so they understood danger quickly. When Sandra explained her symptoms, her father did not hesitate even for a second. He did not try to comfort her with soft words. He did not suggest waiting or resting first. His voice was firm and direct. He told her to go to the hospital immediately, not later, not after sleep, right away. At that moment, the decision was made. Sandra was going to the hospital, but time had already moved too far ahead. The first strange signs had started the night before. Then came a long night filled with growing symptoms. By morning, she could feel weakness on one side of her body. By the time she was finally ready to leave, more than 12 hours had already passed. And that delay mattered more than she knew. In stroke cases, doctors talk about something called the golden window. This is the short period after a stroke begins when fast treatment can still save brain function. The first hour is the most important. After that, every passing minute increases damage because brain cells begin to lose blood and oxygen. Sandra knew this very well. She had studied it. She had treated patients. She had explained it to others many times. She understood how quickly a stroke can become permanent. But even with all that knowledge, she still waited. Not because she did not understand, but because it is very hard to believe something serious is happening to your own body. By the time Sandra finally understood the full picture, the golden window had already closed. When she reached the emergency room, everything changed immediately. She had barely started explaining her symptoms, mentioning her weak arm and changes in speech, when the medical team reacted at once. A wheelchair was quickly brought behind her. She was no longer treated like a normal patient walking in for a checkup. She was rushed inside without delay. The hospital team followed the stroke emergency process. Tests began immediately. First, a CT scan, then an MRI. There was no waiting, no guessing, no slowing down. The results came quickly. Sandra Lee had suffered a stroke. A part of her brain had not received enough blood and oxygen for too long. When this happens, brain cells begin to die. Sandra understood this instantly. She did not need anyone to explain it in detail. The truth was simple, but painful. A part of her brain had stopped working, and beyond the medical emergency, something even deeper became clear. Sandra Lee was not new to medicine. She had spent her life studying the human body. She knew how to recognize stroke symptoms. She knew the danger of delay. She knew what should be done. But when it happened to her, she reacted differently. Instead of seeing everything as one clear warning, she broke it into small pieces in her mind. The sweating might be stress. The swallowing issue might be tiredness. The weakness might be simple exhaustion after long work. One by one, she gave each sign a softer explanation. Not because she was careless, not because she lacked knowledge, but because accepting a frightening truth about herself was emotionally difficult. That moment of delay between knowing and acting became the most dangerous part of all. When the scans confirmed the stroke, there was no more doubt left. But another painful truth followed. There is a treatment called TPA that can sometimes reduce damage from a stroke if given very early. It works only within a short time after symptoms begin. That time window had already passed. Sandra had arrived too late for it. The symptoms had started the night before. By the time she reached the hospital, it was no longer possible to use that treatment. The doctors could not reverse the stroke anymore. Now their work changed. They were no longer trying to undo what had happened. They were focused only on preventing further damage and helping her body stabilize. In that moment, everything became clear in a very hard way. Time had been the most important factor, and it had already slipped away. So, how did she overcome this shocking tragedy? Return after the stroke. Following her stroke, Sandra Lee significantly reduced her workload. Her once hectic calendar, filled for years, abruptly cleared. The bustling film locations, lengthy days of shooting, and never-ending work obligations vanished quickly. Rather than hurrying between tasks, her life decelerated out of necessity. She decided to take approximately 6 weeks off from her job to concentrate on getting better. Initially, it looked straightforward from an outsider's perspective. Her routines comprised minor exercises and deliberate movements. She focused on walking, maintaining balance, and relearning how to hold things. While these activities appeared elementary, they soon showcased the extent of the transformation in her physical abilities. The most noticeable change was observed in her left hand. Her hand was crucial to her profession. As a doctor who performed medical procedures, Sandra relied on exact hand movements daily. It was essential for her to maintain steady hands during her work. However, following the stroke, although her left hand was functional, its reliability had diminished. The alteration was minor, but she couldn't overlook it. Her movements were a bit unsteady, hinting to her that her body didn't operate as it used to. This awareness instilled a deep, personal fear in Sandra. The process of recovery wasn't a linear progression. After roughly 4 months, Sandra felt capable of going back to her job. However, resuming work didn't imply she was fully recovered. Her healing process was ongoing, with her condition evolving daily. On certain mornings, everything seemed nearly usual. She began moving with more grace, reacting faster, and her self-assurance built up. However, the moment stress or fatigue surfaced, her symptoms became evident once more. Her body would decelerate a bit. Her actions would grow feebler and lose their sharpness. The advancement didn't completely vanish, but it also wasn't consistently smooth. Her way of speaking became different following the stroke. The distinction was minimal, so slight that it likely went unnoticed by those around her. However, Sandra was always aware of it, particularly in stressful situations or on extended workdays. As fatigue set in, she could more clearly recognize the shift in her speech. The challenging time she had been getting ready for finally arrived. Sandra went back to the movie location. She didn't come back because everything was as it used to be. Instead, she came back because she finally felt she could move forward. However, the surroundings didn't seem like they once did. The spaces, lighting, and routines that she was once so accustomed to now seemed to hold a new and significant emotional impact. Sandra later confessed that re-entering her job induced a profound sense of dread, akin to emotional scars tied to her past ordeal. The location where she initially noticed her symptoms didn't feel entirely secure anymore. While Sandra kept progressing, her attitude toward her job underwent a lasting transformation. Prior to the stroke, she would drive herself to the brink of exhaustion without doubting her capacity. She believed in her body's resilience, expecting it to endure any stress she faced. But once the stroke occurred, that belief was shattered. Sandra experienced a new perspective as she started analyzing herself with the same keen attention she used to apply when examining her patients. She attentively observed every minor indication from her body. Subtle variations that she might have overlooked before now became significant. Feeling tired, weak, or stressed, as well as slight physical alterations, were not something she could easily disregard anymore. She now faced an undeniable reality she couldn't escape. Her physique had transformed. She realized she could no longer postpone listening to it. In the initial months following her stroke, Sandra's attention wasn't solely on healing her body. A different troubling question lingered softly in her mind each day. Is it possible for her to keep pursuing her passion? Her hands had been essential to her professional life for a long time. She considered them her most reliable instruments. Now, she questioned if they could still manage the tasks with the accuracy and stability required to keep going safely. 4 months following her stroke, she made her formal comeback to work. On the surface, it seemed like things were returning to normal. The cameras came back, as did the patients. Familiar habits gradually started up again. However, below that calm exterior, an entirely new pattern was unfolding. Sandra had adopted a more deliberate and cautious pace in her work compared to earlier. Actions that used to come effortlessly now demanded more focus. She paid closer attention to her hands while performing tasks, intentionally managing each motion with heightened mindfulness. She stopped pushing herself to operate at the relentless pace she previously thought was standard. It wasn't due to her incapability to carry on. However, she had come to the realization that forcing her body to exceed its limits posed a risk to her health. Her healing journey is still evolving daily. On certain days, she experiences stability and strength. On others, she is reminded that the process is ongoing. She still finds that stress and fatigue sometimes slow her down and make her movements less accurate. While others might not notice the alterations, Sandra is acutely aware of them, listening to the body. When Sandra Lee came back to the set to start filming again, it felt unlike any previous experience. The location that had been the launchpad of everything now seemed to hold a subtle and personal significance. There wasn't any obvious chaos or noticeable anxiety, but underneath it all, a fresh sense of unease had taken root. A thought lingered in her head. Is there a possibility of it occurring once more? If it happened again, would she be able to recognize the indicators in time? Prior to her stroke, Sandra never had to concern herself with such matters. She had full confidence in her physical abilities. Extended hours at work, stress, and fatigue had become standard aspects of her daily routine. She was convinced she could keep going, regardless of her exhaustion. The conviction was altered following the stroke. Her everyday activities started to move at a more deliberate and steady pace. The once hectic and frenetic schedules ceased to dominate her life. Sandra shifted her focus from powering through pain to completing tasks to being attuned to the subtle cues her body sent her each day. She began to take breaks more frequently. Caring for sleep took on a new priority. Instead of ignoring tiredness, she started recognizing its significance. She began to treat her own well-being with the same diligence and attention she had always shown to those under her care. A significant transformation occurred within her private affairs. Sandra stopped trying to handle everything by herself. Her spouse, who was also her co-worker, became a much more significant support system. Their bond became increasingly crucial in assisting her to juggle her career and well-being. Her strength wasn't the issue, not due to her inability to manage responsibilities anymore. However, she no longer felt the urge to demonstrate that she could handle every challenge solely by herself. The most significant change following the stroke wasn't something that others could easily notice. It was an internal shift in how Sandra now perceived her identity. She had let go of the notion that she could perfectly manage everything. She began to pay attention to little warning signs instead of dismissing them as minor issues that could be postponed. Above all, she had stopped postponing action until her health became severely compromised. Sandra carried on with her work. She stayed in the public eye and kept assisting countless individuals in gaining a deeper understanding of their personal health and dermatological issues. To the majority of her audience, she maintained an appearance of composure, expertise, and professionalism. However, there was an element that would remain altered from now on. She needed to develop the skill of paying close attention to her body's signals, especially once the situation turned risky. The harm was already done by the time it was addressed. At a recent public event, Sandra positioned herself before the camera, just as she had done countless times before. At first, it all looked quite the same. Her voice was as composed as ever. Her gestures maintained their usual deliberate and expert quality. The established flow of her work still persisted. When observed with care, a minor distinction became apparent. She took longer breaks between her actions. It was as though she had a heightened sense of self-awareness while performing tasks, as if she needed to mentally approve each step before proceeding. What were once instinctive actions now seemed deliberate, demanding her focus and mindfulness. The sense of urgency had completely disappeared. The urgency to get everything done quickly was no longer present. Sandra now moved at a slower, more deliberate pace, not due to a lack of competence, but because she decided she wanted to approach life differently. Maybe that was the most significant transformation overall. It's not about what she no longer has, but what drove her decision to keep going. Reflecting on Sandra Lee's path, her narrative transcends a mere health crisis. It delves into an area that numerous individuals encounter, yet frequently shy away from addressing truthfully. Sandra possessed sufficient knowledge. She was aware of the symptoms. She could identify the warning signals. All observations were in line with what her medical education had prepared her for. A misunderstanding was never the issue. The real threat emerged during those brief instances when accepting reassuring explanations seemed more convenient.